Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It is the CFL Week 19 edition of the show. Ian Cameron with you, and fresh off a massive win for my Hamilton Tiger Cats last week against the Toronto Argonauts in a game that maybe four people were watching. In comparison, obviously, the Toronto Blue Jays playoff game against the Yankees that was going on at the same time. Here I am rocking the Ticat shirt. Obviously, a victory week for the Ticats, and a big step closer to them clinching the East Division, which they will be able to do with a victory this weekend at home against the Calgary Stampeders. We'll get to that game, and we will get to the Week 19 slate in just a minute. First, let's talk about the team that's on a bye this week. The only team on a bye week, as we're back to 4 games on the slate this week on this Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, and that team is the BC Lions, a team that offensively, there's been no issues for weeks. Nathan Rourke and the offense have done their part. They've looked good. They've been slinging the ball. The passing game has been terrific. You know, they have a good enough run game with Butler. I think the offensive line has gotten better. The problem for BC this year has been their defense. And I'll say this about their defense. It's still not good, but it's getting better. You know, I think the last couple weeks we've seen it improve a little bit. You know, the 2 wins against Calgary in the last 3 weeks, I think the defense played pretty well in both of those games. I think they played pretty solid in the home win against Toronto and Nick Arbuckle as well. You know, it wasn't easy for the Argos to get the points they got in that game. You know, Toronto wasn't marching the ball up and down. Vernon Adams struggled in both games against BC when BC played Calgary recently at 2 of the last 3 games. So positive signs for this much maligned BC defense that they've certainly played a little bit better. And here's the thing with BC as far as projecting forward and their Grey Cup hopes. They don't need to be a great defense. They don't. They have Nathan Rourke, and they have an explosive, dynamic, quick strike offense that has been fully on display for the last month or two, when Nathan Rourke and this Lions offense has been, you know, they've been scoring into the 30s pretty much every week. For the last month to 2 months. You just need to play sound situational defense. And what I mean by that is you're probably going to give up your yards, and BC's defense has certainly done that, but you've got to get timely stops, critical stops when your team needs it, stops when momentum is starting to get away from you and you need to get the momentum back on your side. Those are the kind of defensive stops we need to see from BC. I don't expect them to shut teams down, and I don't think they're capable of shutting teams down. But when your offense is this good right now with Nathan Rourke, all you need is a little defense, timely stops, maybe forcing a turnover at the right time, and that's all that's going to be required. You don't need to be the 85 Bears on defense, not with this quarterback and not with this offense playing like they've been playing for the last month or two. If you're BC, the goal is to just play complementary defense, you know, get stops when you need them. You know, yeah, you're going to give up some points. You're going to give up some touchdowns because you're not an elite defense, but you're going to be able to score enough on a weekly basis that if you just get the key stops when you need them, you're going to have a chance to still win a lot of games and maybe be very dangerous in the playoffs. So BC certainly trending up a little bit, and we'll see how they fare coming out of the bye week. And of course, they are in that 3-way battle right now with Calgary and Winnipeg for second in the West Division, which is, of course, giving you a home game in the Grey Cup playoffs for that West Division semifinal. So it's very important. I think it's safe to assume Saskatchewan's going to win the West Division. I don't think Calgary, Winnipeg, or BC can close that gap in just 3 weeks left in the season. So it's really a battle for that second place in the West between the Lions, the Stamps, and the Bombers right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So still a lot to play for BC. Home field in the West Division semifinal is still a very realistic possibility for them. So certainly incentive for them when they return to action following their bye week. All right, let's get into Week 19. We will begin with Friday night football tonight. Toronto and Saskatchewan. We've got Saskatchewan 11-point home favorites, 49.5 the total. Toronto absolutely bombed by the Ticats last week, 47-29, a loss that officially eliminated them from the playoffs, although it felt like they had been out of the playoff race for a while now. You know, you look at this game, and obviously Saskatchewan is a double-digit favorite for multiple reasons. One, they're the better team. Two, they're at home. Three, it's obviously a lot more incentive for Saskatchewan. They're trying to clinch the West Division title and move a big step closer to doing that. And fourth is the fact that Toronto is going with Jarrett Doege at quarterback. They've shut down Nick Arbuckle for the rest of the season due to injury. He suffered that injury early in the game against Hamilton last week. They're not going to risk anything. Season's over anyway. Why would you play him anyway? With the now that you're out of the playoffs. So Jarrett Doege gets the start. They'll get a chance to evaluate him. I'm hearing too that Tucker Horn, the other quarterback on this Toronto Argonauts roster, is going to get some playing time. Maybe not tonight, but in the last couple games here down the stretch, as Ryan Dinwiddie tries to evaluate his depth quarterbacks for the rest of the season. And that's what it is. It's just an evaluation period for the Argos. So are they going to play with pride? Are they going to try to play spoiler? Are you still going to get a hard effort from them down the stretch? It's hard to gauge that. Saskatchewan, when this line opened, I felt, they priced it pretty good. I mean, I don't want any part of Toronto on the road and Doege on the road. But I will say this. So I don't want Toronto. It would be lay the points or nothing. Lay it or don't play it. But I'm a little hesitant to lay it. And I'm hesitant to lay this many points with Saskatchewan for a few reasons. One is their defense is still really injury-riddled right now, especially in the secondary. That's where it's really bad. Nelson Lacombo, Tevin Campbell, Roland Milligan, Defensive Player of the Year last year, one of the best players in the secondary of all in the CFL, out for this game. Marcus Sales is going to play, but he's been banged up, nursing an injury throughout the week. There's a lot of issues with this pass defense for Saskatchewan. And, when Drew Brown for Ottawa, wasn't throwing interceptions, they were moving the ball a bit against Saskatchewan. And even Crum, when he came into the game, moved the ball a bit in that game. So and we know Saskatchewan's pass defense was ripped by McLeod Bethel Thompson in Montreal in one of their recent home games a few weeks ago. So you can throw on Saskatchewan's defense. The question is going to be, can Jarrett Doege throw the ball efficiently, accurately, and make plays against this decimated Saskatchewan secondary? I'll say this about his performance against Hamilton after Arbuckle got injured. He moved the football. Like, they moved the ball. They put up points for extended stretches. The problem was red zone efficiency. They settled for way too many field goals. But he was moving the football, Jarrett Doege. And I wonder if with that Saskatchewan pass defense banged up, if he's able to move the football here as well. However, on the flip side, I think this has every potential to be the get-right game for the offense for Saskatchewan, because Trevor Harris and the Riders' offense has not been great the last 2 weeks. They couldn't move the ball. They turned it over a ton against Edmonton a couple weeks ago. A lot of their points came later in the game when they fell behind. They really didn't do much in the first half. And then last week against Ottawa, right down the field for a touchdown on their first drive, and the offense just stalled after that. They really didn't move the football all that well against Ottawa. And keep in mind, one of their touchdowns was a pick six. It was a defensive touchdown. Pick six thrown by Drew Brown. So we have seen some serious regression from Trevor Harris and the Saskatchewan offense. And he's throwing interceptions and bad decisions, inaccuracy, which we do not expect from Trevor Harris. We've suddenly seen a lot of that from him the last couple weeks. That being said, what defense in the CFL can cure what ails you? Facing the Toronto Argonauts defense can often do that. So I think this is probably the spot where we could see this Riders offense resemble more with the way they looked early in the season. Bounce back for Trevor Harris. This secondary is, you can throw on it, you can slice it, you can dice it. They don't cover well at all down the field. There's very little pass rush. And, Winton McManus has been shut down for this game as well, out, the best player on that Argos defense. And they were struggling to get stops with him on the field. So I'm going to make a case for the over in this game. 49.5 the total. It went over the total between these teams in Toronto early in the season. I know it's Doege, and it's tough to trust him fully on the road, but he did move the football. And even if and now he has, I think, 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So interceptions have been a big problem for Doege. Not a surprise. But even if he throws interceptions here, that could be good for the over. It's going to set up Trevor Harris and the Rider offense, probably with some short fields, you'd like to hope. So I think we're going to see Saskatchewan put up a big number. But I think against Saskatchewan's shorthanded secondary, I think Toronto can do enough. offensively to help push this game up and over that total sitting at 49.5. And keep in mind, Toronto can't run the football. There's no run game to speak of whatsoever for the Toronto Argonauts. They have not had any ground attack to speak of this year. So when you throw the football 90% of the time, that's good news for over bettors too, because it stops the clock more. You're going to get more plays. So I will get in on the over here at 49.5. I think it's favorite or pass for me, but it's not a cheap price to take Saskatchewan. All right, let's turn to Saturday. Doubleheader starting with the game I'll be at. Calgary-Hamilton. Hamilton 3-point home favorites, 56.5 the total. Here's a surprise. I can't remember the last time it was a rainy forecast in Hamilton for a home game. We might have one tomorrow. It's looking like showers in the afternoon during this game. I don't think wind is going to be a big deal, and I don't think the rain is going to be heavy, but we are calling for some light showers throughout the game Saturday afternoon. So not the greatest weather, and that's what's holding me back from the total here, and it is a high number, 56.5. Not to mention Calgary's offense has really hit a bit of a speed bump here. Vernon Adams has not played. This is now multiple games in a row. Vernon Adams has made mistakes, interceptions, hasn't played crisp football for 4 quarters. This goes back to both BC games. This goes back to the Montreal game as well. The offense he's just not clicking. He's not seeing the field like he did early in the year. Now, Hamilton's defense is still far from elite, obviously. So maybe Calgary can get some offense going here in this game. With the weather maybe being a bit of an issue, maybe that they rely on Dedrick Mills running the football in this game. It's revenge for Hamilton. They lost in week 1 at Calgary early in the year. I think Hamilton can win this game. Here's the way I see it. I loved Hamilton last week. You guys know that. It was the best bet on the show. Easy winner. I bet Hamilton here, but this is small action. This is, pump the brakes. If you're going to bet the Ticats here, as I did, I took a minus 145 on the money line. Bet them small, but I do, I think, Calgary struggled, I know, the last couple times they've come out to Hamilton. Ticats, they've played, much better game after the blowout loss to Winnipeg. Don't love the way VA is playing right now. And I'll say this about Hamilton. Their secondary is starting to intercept other quarterbacks. They're starting to become a ball-hawking secondary with the way VA is kind of turning the ball over lately. Maybe that Hamilton defense can turn VA over a few times here in this game to make all the difference. And this ain't the same Calgary defense either. This Stamps defense, which, early in the year was playing pretty solid, they've really lost their way. I think the issues with the Stampeder defense are just as worrisome as what we've seen from Vernon Adams and the offense the last few weeks. I mean, look at the Calgary. They've given up 38, 38, 52, and 31 in the last 4 games. 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread in those games. So this offense is having a lot of difficulty. I wouldn't talk anyone out of a Ticats team total over. We know the strength of the team is, the offense with Bo Levi Mitchell and all those great receivers. The team total is 29.5. The rain is a slight concern here with betting the team total, but you could go that route instead of Hamilton -3 if you prefer it. But like I said, Hamilton has beaten Calgary at home 2 years in a row. It was 22-15 2 years ago. Last year, around the same time, it was October last year that Calgary played in Hamilton. We beat them 42-20 in that game. So some kind of Hamilton -3, Hamilton money line, Hamilton team total over 29.5. I'd probably lean in those directions. Stressing to everybody watching that I do not like Hamilton as anywhere close to as much here as I did last week against Toronto. But I still lean Ticats here to get the job done. And with a win, Hamilton can clinch the East Division. So big-time incentive, to get it done in front of the home fans here at Hamilton Stadium, wrap up the East Division with this win, and get that all-important bye to the East Division final when the Grey Cup playoffs begin. All right, next up, we've got Winnipeg and Edmonton. Winnipeg here, 3.5-point road favorites. The total here sitting at, looks like around 53.5 across the board. Both teams off a bye week, and both teams off victories coming into this game. Edmonton, and this was a incorrect call for me a couple weeks ago. I took Saskatchewan against Edmonton, and Edmonton was just, let's be honest, Edmonton was the better team. They got out to the early first half lead. Saskatchewan made it interesting late, but and almost could have tied it with a 2-point conversion late. But let's be honest, Edmonton had the lead most of the game. They deserved to win that game. They played with great emotion. That was the game following the passing of their owner. The team owner had passed away in the days leading up to that game. And I think they definitely played with a little extra emotion against Saskatchewan. So Edmonton, as we know, has been a point spread machine. They've been an ATS darling. They've been covering a lot of these numbers. It's not the easiest move in the world to fade Edmonton when they're catching points. And I cautioned, even though I was on Saskatchewan, that's what I was worried about in that game. And sure enough, Edmonton covered again and won outright. That's what I worry about here too, but my gut says Winnipeg beats them and maybe beats them by margin. And here's why. Winnipeg has owned this series. They've won 8 straight against Edmonton, and all the victories have been by margin. Like, there has not been a single Winnipeg victory in recent years over Edmonton where there hasn't been a single one where it's been close. 24-10, 48-11, 28-14, 38-29, 45-25, 27-14, 55-27, 36-23. I mean, these have been Winnipeg wins. I think all of them one of them was by 9 points. Every other Winnipeg win during this 8-game win streak head-to-head against Edmonton, every other win, 7 of the 8 wins were by double digits. And you've got Mike O'Shea and this Bombers team off a bye. So is Killam, but you got to give a coaching edge probably to Mike O'Shea in this situation. Long term, he does have a very good track record off a bye week in all his years here with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. This team's always been pretty good off a bye week. Now, that wasn't the case at home against Calgary when they were coming off a bye, but I think that's the game. Didn't Kolaros get injured in that game and Strevler have to take over? I'm pretty sure of that. But this is still a team that's been, more good than bad coming off a bye week, a team that we trust. Remember, they also had a bye week 1. They didn't play week 1. They played week 2. And we saw with Strevler at quarterback, they beat BC 34-20. But long term, I mean, going back years, Mike O'Shea off a bye week's been a pretty good bet in this league. So I'm going to take Winnipeg here. There's actually a couple threes out there at a couple books, -3, -115, -118 with Winnipeg. DraftKings has a -3. The Score Bet has -3. I'm going to take the Bombers here to get the win. Obviously, this is an important game for Winnipeg because they're trying to battle with the likes of BC and Calgary for second in the West. Edmonton is still alive, but faintly alive right now in the playoff race. So they're not mathematically eliminated yet, but let's be honest, it's an uphill battle. Edmonton's not making the playoffs in all likelihood. Yeah, they may take the field mathematically alive, but how realistic do they believe their chances are of making the playoffs? So I think Winnipeg, it's just, 8 straight and all 8 wins by 9 points or more for Winnipeg over Edmonton. That's a hard track record to bet against. So I'll take Winnipeg here -3 as a slight road favorite. Total 53.5. I think it's a little too high for me to love the over in this game, even though I could see points being scored. And even though, Cody Fajardo and the offense has been good, and we have noticed some regression in the Edmonton defense, in recent weeks. And look at these last 3 Edmonton games, 61, 56, 52 for total points. So one of them would have stayed under this number of 53.5. But like I said, they've gone back into the higher scoring vicinity here in some of these recent games. But it's pretty good total, 53.5 with where odds makers put it. All right, final game of this Week 19 CFL slate. This is Canadian Thanksgiving Monday afternoon game here to wrap up the week. Ottawa and Montreal. Montreal 13.5-point home favorites, 51.5 the total. This is lay it or don't play it. I don't think at any number Ottawa is backable right now. They're out of the playoffs. They look terrible. The offense, Drew Brown had his probably the worst game I've ever seen him play. It was so bad he got benched for Dustin Crum. That's when you know you've had a horrible game, that you get benched for fucking, of all people, Dustin Crum. And that's what happened to Drew Brown last week against Saskatchewan. I'll give their defense some credit. They hung in there. Offense was giving them very little. The defense hung in there. They really put the clamps down on Trevor Harris and the Riders in the second half. Let them have a chance to come back, but they still lost 20-13. That's now the 3rd straight straight up loss and the third straight point spread cover defeat for the Ottawa. 0-3 straight up, 0-3 against the spread their last 3 games going into this one against Montreal. Montreal team that got Davis Alexander, who is still got back at quarterback before the bye week, still undefeated as a CFL starting quarterback, and he did not look rusty at all. You could not tell that was a Davis Alexander that had been out for several weeks with the way he played 2 weeks ago against Calgary in his return. He looked awesome. Running with the football, making plays, on the run, throwing the ball accurately on the run, which is one of his great qualities as a quarterback. He absolutely just took apart that Calgary defense, start to finish. 38-20 was the victory. I did some digging here because I could only back Montreal minus 13.5 here, but I wanted to take a look at the points that Montreal's put up this season, specifically when Davis Alexander has started. And I did the look into it and found that 5 games that Davis Alexander has started this season, and in those 5 games, Montreal scored 28, 39, 38, 26, and 38 points. So in 3 of those 5 games, they've scored into the 30s. And 3 of those 5 games, they would have scored enough points to get over the team total for Montreal in this game, which is lined at 32.5. So that's what I like most. I like Montreal team total over 32.5. I don't think Ottawa's going to slow them down. Alexander's in a groove. They've got pretty much all the receivers healthy again for the most part. The offensive line's gotten a lot better. They're starting to really run the football with a great deal of effectiveness. And what's impressive about Montreal's ability to run the football is that they've had different running backs every week. Sean Thomas Erlington, Stevie Scott, Travis Tice. And it doesn't matter who's in there. They've been able to have some semblance of success running the football in recent games. So, like I said, I don't know if Ottawa is going to be able to slow down Davis Alexander in this Montreal attack on Saturday. Or on Monday, rather. I guess the one concern is if Hamilton wins on Saturday, which Montreal will know by the time they kick off on Monday. If Hamilton wins Saturday, that takes Montreal out of any possibility of winning the East Division. Do they kind of go through the motions now, knowing that they're going to finish second in the East, and maybe not go balls to the wall down the stretch, maybe even rest Davis Alexander for portions of these games down the stretch? That's something you have to factor in the back of your mind. Nevertheless, though, for this game, coming off a bye, I think Davis plays the full game, regardless of the outcome of the Ticats game on Saturday. And I think they'll put up a bunch of points on this pretty bad Ottawa defense, in spite of the fact they played well last week against Saskatchewan. I don't buy them here playing well against this Montreal offense here, especially when I mentioned the point totals that Montreal scored in the 5 games that Davis Alexander played this year. The game that they scored 39 points earlier this season, one of those 5 games, they scored 39 points. That game was against Ottawa back in week 2. And I remember that game. Davis Alexander picked them apart. 39-18 was the final score for Montreal in Ottawa back in June. And obviously, if they score 39 points here, you're going to cash your team total over. So that's what I've got my eye on here. Montreal team total over 32.5 on Monday afternoon on Canadian Thanksgiving to wrap up CFL Week 19. All right, there you have it. CFL Week 19. Thanks for tuning in. As always, hit the like button. Let's wrap it up with a best bet here for CFL Week 19. I'm going to go right back to that last game. I think for me, it is the best bet on the board in the CFL this week. Montreal team total over 32.5. I think they get 34, 35 plus against this Ottawa defense. Davis Alexander led this Montreal offense to 39 points against Ottawa back in week 2, and that was in Ottawa. Again, I know Hamilton can win the East Division if they beat Calgary, clinch the East Division if they beat Calgary on Saturday, and if that happens, does that lessen the intensity here for Montreal a bit? Perhaps, but I still think Alexander, coming off a bye especially, I think they want to get Davis Alexander here ramped up, get him feeling good, get him in rhythm, get his confidence as high as it can be for the playoffs. And like I said, I don't know if this Ottawa defense has it in them to be able to stop Davis Alexander and this Montreal offense. If he plays like he did against Calgary 2 weeks ago, Montreal's going to go over their team total here, in my opinion. So Montreal Alouettes team total over 32.5, -110. That'll be my best bet for CFL Week 19 here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. That's a wrap for this show. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the like button on the way out. I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy CFL Week 19 and good luck. And we will see you again next week for another CFL edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.